You meet someone on a Wednesday. By Friday, you've already pictured the wedding, the house you might buy together, the particular way your future kids could laugh. You've imagined growing old beside a person you've technically known for 48 hours. From the outside, people call this romantic, or naive, maybe even a little embarrassing. But here's what nobody tells you. This isn't really about the person sitting across from you. It's about something much older, much quieter, something that's been living inside you for years, long before this person ever walked in. What if the rush isn't love at all? What if it's your nervous system doing exactly what it learned to do a long time ago to feel safe? Stay with me, because today we're going to look closely at why some people fall in love in a single evening and how to finally stop burning out in that same cycle over and over again. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your body in that first moment. Because it's not magic, it's chemistry. When you meet someone new and there's a spark, even a small one, your brain releases a flood of dopamine, the same chemical involved in addiction, in the rush of winning, in the pull of a slot machine. Alongside it comes norepinephrine, which is why your heart races, why you can't eat, why you replay their texts at 2 in the morning. And then oxytocin joins in, the bonding hormone, the one that makes you feel like you already know this person, like something real has already been built. Here's the thing though, none of that is love, not yet. It's intensity. And your brain, this is important, your brain is remarkably bad at telling the difference between the two. Real attachment, the kind that holds up over years, is built slowly, through small moments of being seen, being disappointed, being forgiven, being chosen again on an ordinary Tuesday when nothing exciting is happening at all. But if you fall in love fast and hard every single time, there's usually a reason underneath it. And it often goes back further than the person in front of you. For a lot of people who love this way, it traces back to childhood. Not necessarily anything dramatic. Sometimes it's just inconsistency. A parent who is warm on Monday and distant on Thursday. Love that showed up unpredictably, so you learned to watch closely for it, to grab it when it appeared, because you never knew when it might disappear again. If that's your story, think about what that taught your nervous system. It taught you that attention is precious and rare. So when someone finally gives you their full focus, really looks at you, texts back fast, says the right thing at the right moment, some old part of you exhales and says, finally, I found it. That reaction isn't weakness. I want to be clear about that. It's not a character flaw, and it's definitely not something to be ashamed of. It's a strategy, a smart one actually, given what you were working with. Your nervous system learned a long time ago that safety needed to be found quickly before it slipped away again. It's still trying to protect you. It's just using an old map for a new territory. Okay, so now that you understand where this comes from, let's look at what it actually looks like from the inside. Because I think if you're watching this, some part of you already suspects you'll recognize yourself here. And that's okay. Recognizing a pattern is the first step toward not being run by it anymore. The first sign is idealization from the very first meeting. You meet someone, and within hours, sometimes within minutes, you've already built a whole person in your mind. Not from what they've shown you, but from what you've filled in around the edges. A few good qualities, a nice laugh, one thoughtful comment, and suddenly your brain does something remarkable. It takes those fragments and constructs an entire narrative. This person is kind. This person is safe. This person is different from everyone else who's hurt you. Psychologists call part of this the halo effect, the tendency to assume that because someone is good in one way, they must be good in every way. And layered on top of that is something called projection, where you're not actually seeing the person in front of you. You're seeing a reflection of everything you've been hoping to find. The second sign is the speed of emotional investment. This is simple, but worth naming clearly. Your attachment forms faster than your actual knowledge of the person does. You feel deeply connected to someone whose middle name you don't know yet. You're imagining a future with someone whose values, in real, tested ways, not in conversation but in action, you haven't seen yet. The feeling arrives long before the evidence does. And that gap between how much you feel and how much you actually know is where a lot of heartbreak quietly lives. The third sign is the way red flags seem to just disappear. Not because you're not smart or not perceptive, you are, but your attention becomes selective. Something in you filters out the things that would normally give you pause, because keeping the high of this new closeness intact feels more important than protecting yourself. Maybe they cancel plans last minute and you find a generous excuse. Maybe they talk about an ex in a way that feels off, and you decide not to think about it too hard. It's not denial exactly. It's more like your nervous system has decided that this feeling is too good to risk questioning. The fourth sign is that your sense of self starts running on their attention. This one can be quietly exhausting, if you're honest with yourself. You check your phone, a reply comes fast, and you feel steady, almost high. A reply comes slowly or doesn't come at all, and something in your chest drops. Your mood, your sense of okayness, starts moving in rhythm with someone else's response time. There's actually a mechanism behind this, and it's the same one behind a lot of addictive behavior. It's called variable reward. When rewards come unpredictably rather than consistently, they become more compelling, not less. A slot machine works this way. So does a phone that sometimes buzzes with something wonderful and sometimes doesn't buzz at all. When someone's attention is inconsistent, your brain doesn't lose interest. It leans in harder, trying to crack the code, trying to guess what will make the good feeling come back. And the fifth sign, the one underneath all the others, is that falling in love becomes less about the other person and more about escaping being alone with yourself. This is the one worth sitting with for a second, because on the surface, all of this looks like romance. It looks like passion, like being someone who loves fully and without holding back. But sometimes, underneath that, there's something quieter happening, a kind of relief. Being wanted by someone else means you don't have to be alone with whatever you've been avoiding. The silence, the doubt, the parts of yourself you haven't quite made peace with yet. So the falling isn't really about them at all. It's about what their attention temporarily fills. I want to pause here and say something clearly, because I don't want any of this to land as criticism. None of these 5 signs means something is wrong with you. They mean your heart learned a long time ago to move fast toward warmth because warmth once felt scarce. That's not pathetic. It's actually kind of beautiful in a sad way. It means you never stopped hoping that this time it might be real. The problem was never your capacity to feel deeply. The problem is that feeling deeply on its own was never designed to tell you whether someone is actually safe to trust. So what happens after all of that? After the fast rise, after the flood of dopamine and imagined futures, what actually comes next? Usually, it's a fall, and it tends to follow the same shape almost every time. First comes the high, the texting that feels electric, the sense that you've finally found something real, the way ordinary days suddenly feel lit up because this person exists in them now. It feels, for a little while, like proof that you were right to hope. Then reality starts to arrive, slowly, in small pieces. The person turns out to be a person, inconsistent sometimes, distracted sometimes, not quite the character you built in those first few days. And because the gap between the fantasy and the truth was so wide to begin with, the landing hurts more than it should. It doesn't feel like a normal disappointment. It feels like loss. Like grief for something that, if you're honest, never fully existed outside your own mind. And then comes the crash, the emptiness that follows, the exhaustion of having felt so much, so fast, for nothing that could hold the weight of it. Here's what's easy to miss, though. This cycle doesn't just cost you the relationship. It costs you something quieter, and in some ways more expensive. It costs you trust in your own judgment. Every time this happens, a small voice starts to whisper that your feelings can't be relied on, that your excitement is a warning sign instead of something to enjoy, that maybe you shouldn't trust yourself around connection at all. That's a heavy thing to carry into the next person you meet. And underneath all of it is this, instead of steady, grounded closeness, life starts to feel like a repeating roller coaster, Up fast, down hard, over and over, with very little time spent anywhere in between. You start to wonder if calm, ordinary love is even something you're capable of, or whether intensity is just the only language your heart knows how to speak. But here's the quiet truth underneath the whole cycle, the one worth sitting with for a moment. You were never actually falling in love with the person. You were falling in love with an idea of them, a version built from hope and hunger and everything you needed them to be. And no real person, no matter how wonderful, can ever quite live up to a fantasy they didn't know they were auditioning for. Now, here's the part I actually want you to remember, long after this video ends. You cannot simply tell yourself to stop falling fast. That doesn't work. Trying to force yourself into coldness, into guardedness, usually just adds another layer of pain on top of the first one. The goal was never to feel less. The goal is to change where all that feeling gets pointed. So let's talk about 3 shifts that actually help. The first is learning to separate the chemistry from the actual knowledge. That spark you feel, the racing heart, the constant thinking about them, the sense that this is different. None of that needs to be silenced. It's real and it's allowed to exist, but it's not information about who this person actually is. It's information about how your body responds to novelty and attention. So instead of treating that spark as proof, try treating it as a question. Let time answer it. Not out of suspicion, but out of respect for how real trust actually gets built, through repetition, through watching what someone does across weeks, not just what they say in the first few days. The second shift is paying attention to green flags, not just red ones. Most of us have gotten fairly good at scanning for danger, for the things that might hurt us. But it's just as important to notice the opposite, consistency instead of intensity. Does this person follow through on small things? Are they the same person on a boring Tuesday as they were on the exciting first night? Can they handle a disagreement without disappearing or blowing up? These signs aren't as thrilling as fireworks. They're quieter. But they're the actual building blocks of something that lasts, and they deserve just as much of your attention as the warning signs do. The third shift is learning to sit in the pause. This might be the hardest one, honestly. It means resisting the urge to fill uncertainty with story. When you don't know yet how someone feels or where this is going, there's a pull to decide the ending early, to fall fully in either direction, hope or fear, just so the not knowing stops. But real intimacy requires tolerating that unknown for a while, letting a person unfold at their own pace, rather than writing their whole story for them in your head after one good conversation. Here's what I want you to understand about all of this. None of it means loving less or loving with your guard permanently up. It means letting that same depth of feeling you already have become something that holds you steady, instead of something you fall into as an escape. The goal was never to want less. It was to build a foundation strong enough to actually hold what you feel. So if you recognized yourself somewhere in this video, in the fast falling, the idealizing, the way your mood used to rise and fall with someone else's reply, I want you to hear this clearly. That's not a flaw in you. It's not too much. It's a big heart that never had the chance to learn it was safe to slow down. That capacity to feel so deeply, so quickly, it's rare. Most people move through the world a little numb, a little guarded. You don't. And once you learn to point that same depth somewhere steadier, it stops being something that burns you and starts being something that actually holds you. I'd love to know, did you see yourself in any of these 5 signs? Tell me in the comments which one hit closest to home. Sometimes just saying it out loud is the beginning of changing it.